The story begins in a quiet suburban town, the kind of place where people waved politely to their neighbors and mothers gathered on front porches to share the latest news over cups of tea. In this town lived a girl named Emily. She was a fair-skinned teenager with blonde hair that always shimmered under the sun and blue eyes that seemed to hold both innocence and stubborn defiance. To many, she looked like the perfect child. Her parents adored her, but they also worried about the restless spirit that seemed to burn within her. Emily's parents, David and Margaret, were traditional people who valued discipline, responsibility, and hard work. They had built their lives from the ground up, never indulging in recklessness, never chasing temporary pleasures. To them, life was about stability, family, and faith. But Emily, their only daughter, didn't share their outlook. She found their advice outdated, their rules suffocating, and their constant warnings nothing more than chains holding her back from the freedom she craved. From an early age, Emily had been different. Where other children listened, she questioned. Where other teenagers followed rules, she rebelled. She longed for excitement, for thrill, for the chance to taste life outside the carefully guarded walls her parents built around her. And as she grew older, that longing only intensified. By the time Emily was 15, she had discovered a world her parents feared, a world of parties, music, flashing lights, and friends who believed life was too short to play it safe. She began sneaking out at night, at first timidly, with lies about sleepovers and study sessions. But soon, the lies became second nature, and the thrill of escaping her parents' control became an addiction she couldn't resist. Her parents noticed the changes. They noticed the way she came home with tired eyes, the smell of perfume mixed with smoke lingering on her clothes, the way her grades began to slip. They warned her again and again. "Emily," her father would say, his voice firm but weary, "the path you're walking will only bring you pain. Friends who lead you to rebellion are not true friends. You're too young to throw your future away." Her mother, gentler but no less concerned, would plead, "Sweetheart, we only want what's best for you. Listen to us. Life isn't about parties and temporary fun. One mistake can change everything." But Emily didn't listen. Their words rolled off her like water against stone. To her, they were old-fashioned, out of touch with reality, unable to understand what it meant to be young and alive. She wanted to feel the pulse of music under her skin, to laugh until her voice grew hoarse, to dance with boys who made her feel beautiful and free. She wanted to live without restraint, without fear. And so she continued. The parties grew wilder. The nights longer. She learned to apply makeup that transformed her from an innocent schoolgirl into a young woman who drew attention wherever she went. She surrounded herself with friends who applauded her boldness and encouraged her recklessness. They whispered in her ear that life was meant to be enjoyed, not endured. Emily started skipping classes. What was the point of school when the world outside offered so much more excitement? She didn't care about assignments or exams. She cared about fitting in, about being seen, about proving to herself that she wasn't just the quiet girl from a strict home. One night, at a party louder and brighter than any she had attended before, Emily met a boy. His name was Ryan. He was older, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and a smile that promised adventure. He wasn't the kind of boy her parents would have approved of. He didn't have ambitions, didn't talk about the future, didn't care about responsibility. But he was charming, and he made Emily feel like the center of the universe. From the moment they met, Emily was drawn to him. He offered her the attention she craved, the thrill she desired, and the validation she secretly longed for. With Ryan, she felt alive in a way she never had before. Their relationship quickly became the center of Emily's world. She spent less time at home, more time with him. Her parents begged her to stop seeing him. They warned her that boys like Ryan cared only for themselves, that he would lead her down a path she couldn't escape. But Emily was deaf to their pleas. She believed she was in love, that Ryan was different, that he would never hurt her. She believed she was old enough to make her own choices, mature enough to handle the consequences. But consequences have a way of finding those who ignore them. Months passed, and Emily's rebellion deepened. She stayed out until dawn, returned home with hollow excuses, and locked herself in her room to avoid her parents' disappointed eyes. Her father grew angrier, her mother more heartbroken. But no matter what they said, Emily wouldn't listen. Then came the night that changed everything. It was after yet another party, after hours of laughter, drinks, and stolen moments with Ryan. Emily woke up one morning feeling different. At first, she dismissed it as exhaustion, the toll of too many late nights. But as days turned into weeks, her body began to change in ways she couldn't ignore. The sickness in the mornings. The fatigue. The weight of something growing inside her. Panic gripped her. She was just 16. A child herself. How could she possibly be carrying a child? When she told Ryan, his reaction was not what she had hoped for. He grew distant, cold. The boy who had once promised her the world now wanted nothing to do with her burden. He told her it wasn't his problem, that she should figure it out on her own. And just like that, the dream she had clung to shattered. Emily's world collapsed. She had defied her parents, ignored their wisdom, and now she was left alone with a secret too heavy for her young shoulders. She tried to hide it at first, wearing loose clothes, avoiding questions. But the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. When her parents found out, their heartbreak was immeasurable. Her father's disappointment was sharp, his words heavy with anger and sorrow. Her mother wept, not just for the baby that was coming, but for the daughter she felt she had lost. Emily thought she had known pain before. But nothing compared to the crushing weight of her mistake. Still, life moved forward. The months passed, her belly grew, and the reality of her choices became undeniable. The girl who once danced under neon lights now spent sleepless nights worrying about diapers, bottles, and the uncertain future. Her friends drifted away, one by one, unwilling to stick around for the struggles of motherhood. Ryan disappeared completely, leaving behind nothing but bitter memories. Emily's parents tried to support her as best they could, but their disappointment lingered. They helped her prepare for the baby, but the warmth of their home was no longer the same. She felt judged, alone, and trapped in a life she had never wanted. And then, at 17, Emily became a mother. She gave birth to a baby boy, small and fragile, with eyes that mirrored her own. She held him in her arms, overwhelmed by a mixture of love, fear, and despair. In that moment, she realized that her life was no longer her own. Every decision, every action, every dream she once had would now revolve around this tiny life. But Emily was not ready. She was still a child, unprepared for the sleepless nights, the endless crying, the financial struggles, the emotional toll. She wanted freedom, but instead she had responsibility. She wanted parties, but instead she had exhaustion. Her parents reminded her daily of the price of her disobedience. Not with cruel words, but with the silence of disappointment, the quiet stares that spoke louder than lectures. And slowly, the weight of it all began to crush her. Emily loved her son, but she resented the life he represented. She wanted to do better for him, to be the mother he deserved, but she couldn't escape the feeling that she had ruined everything. By the time her baby was 5 months old, Emily was at her breaking point. She had no friends, no partner, no future, only the cries of a child she loved but didn't know how to provide for. And it was in this darkness that the thought first crept into her mind, the thought that would change everything, the thought of leaving him. Emily's story didn't unfold overnight. The choices that brought her to the brink of despair began slowly, one decision at a time, until she was caught in a storm she couldn't escape. The heart of it all was Ryan, the boy who seemed to offer everything her parents warned her against, and yet the boy she couldn't resist. Ryan was older, reckless, and charming in the way that dangerous people often are. His smile carried promises he could never keep, and his words painted a picture of freedom Emily had always dreamed about. He wasn't interested in responsibility, and that was exactly why Emily found him irresistible. To her parents, Ryan was the embodiment of everything they feared. He skipped school, drifted from job to job, and never spoke about the future. When they first saw him, their instincts screamed danger. Emily, her father said after their first meeting, his tone heavy with worry, "That boy will not give you the life you deserve. He is a storm, and storms leave nothing but destruction behind." But Emily, blinded by infatuation, only grew more defensive. "You don't understand him," she snapped. "He's not like what you think. He cares about me. He makes me feel alive. Her mother tried the gentler approach, pleading with tears in her eyes. Sweetheart, love isn't about excitement. It's about trust, commitment, and building something that lasts. You can't build a future with someone who doesn't even know what tomorrow looks like. But Emily had already made up her mind. Their warnings only strengthened her resolve. To her, Ryan was proof that she was capable of making her own choices, of carving her own path. And so, she fell deeper into his world. Their romance was intoxicating. Ryan knew how to make her feel special, how to whisper words that melted her defenses, how to convince her that together they could take on the world. With him, she felt seen in ways she never had before. He told her she was beautiful, that she was different from everyone else, that she was worth more than the rules her parents tried to cage her with. And she believed him. Nights spent sneaking out of her bedroom window became more frequent. They would drive through empty roads with music blasting, laughing as though the world belonged only to them. Ryan introduced her to parties where drinks flowed endlessly and laughter echoed against the walls until dawn. Emily, once a sheltered teenager, was suddenly the girl who turned heads. For the first time in her life, she felt free. But freedom came at a cost. Emily's grades plummeted. She skipped school more often, dismissing her teacher's concern with indifference. Her old friends, the ones who still believed in homework and curfews, drifted away. She surrounded herself instead with people who encouraged her recklessness, who clapped her on the back when she downed another drink, who told her she was living the dream. Her parents watched helplessly as their daughter slipped further away. Their home became a battlefield of slammed doors and raised voices. David grew sterner, trying to anchor her with strict rules, while Margaret wept quietly in the kitchen, praying her daughter would come back to them. But Emily was too far gone. Every time they warned her, she ran back to Ryan, convinced that he was the only one who understood her. The more her parents resisted, the more determined she became to prove them wrong. Ryan didn't mind. In fact, he thrived on the rebellion. He liked the power he had over her, the way she looked at him with unwavering loyalty, the way she defended him even when he gave her no reason to. It wasn't long before their relationship crossed boundaries Emily had once sworn she'd never cross. In moments of weakness, wrapped up in the illusion of love, she surrendered more of herself to him. She told herself it was proof of their connection, proof that what they had was real. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that she was giving away pieces of herself she could never get back. Months passed, and the cracks began to show. Ryan's charm didn't always shine. There were days he grew distant, distracted by his own problems. There were times he ignored her messages, times he chose parties with his friends over spending time with her. Emily felt the sting of being second place, but each time, he would return with sweet words and a crooked smile, and she would forgive him all over again. Her parents saw the toll it was taking on her, the way her spark dimmed, the way she carried herself with a mix of defiance and hidden sadness. They tried to intervene, but Emily was locked in a cycle she couldn't break. One night, after a particularly heated argument with her father, Emily ran to Ryan's side in tears. He held her, stroked her hair and whispered, "You don't need them. You've got me. We'll make our own life, our own rules. You're mine, Emily. And I'm yours." Those words sealed her fate. From that moment on, she clung to him more desperately than ever. She ignored the doubts, silenced the warnings, and convinced herself that their love was worth every sacrifice. But then, the changes began. At first, she didn't recognize them for what they were. She felt tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings, unable to keep food down. She brushed it off as stress, as the result of late nights and poor eating habits. But as the weeks passed, the signs became undeniable. Emily was late in a way she had never been before. Fear gripped her, but she tried to push it away. She told herself it was nothing, that her body was simply out of rhythm. But when the truth could no longer be denied, panic set in. Alone in her room, trembling, she faced the reality she had never imagined. She was pregnant. Her world spun. She was just a teenager, still in school, still a child herself. The weight of the life growing inside her crushed every illusion she had built. How could she tell her parents? How could she tell Ryan? When she finally gathered the courage to confess to Ryan, his reaction cut deeper than any knife. Instead of support, she met cold indifference. His smile vanished, replaced by irritation. He told her it wasn't his problem, that she was overreacting, that she should figure it out. Emily begged him, pleaded with him not to leave her alone in this. But Ryan had already checked out. He stopped answering her calls, stopped showing up, stopped being the boy she thought she loved. The harsh truth crashed over her. She was on her own. Her parents, devastated when they discovered the truth, were torn between anger and sorrow. David's disappointment thundered through the house, while Margaret wept until her eyes were red. They had warned her. They had begged her. And now, the very thing they feared had come to pass. Emily's rebellion had cost her everything. Her freedom, her innocence, her dreams. And yet, life refused to pause. The baby inside her grew, each passing day a reminder of the choices she had made. Her friends drifted further away, unable or unwilling to face the reality of her situation. The girl who had once been the life of the party now sat alone in her room, staring at the ceiling, drowning in regret. She felt trapped between two worlds, too young to be a mother, but no longer innocent enough to be a child. The nights she once spent laughing under flashing lights were now filled with tears, with the sound of her own sobs echoing in the darkness. She thought about Ryan, about how easily he had walked away, about how foolish she had been to believe his promises. And yet, no matter how much she wished she could undo the past, the truth was unchanging. A new life was growing inside her. A responsibility she could not escape. Her parents tried to guide her, to help her prepare, but the rift between them was wide. Every word of advice felt like a reminder of her failure. Every gesture of support carried the weight of disappointment. Emily's heart ached with conflicting emotions. She loved the baby she carried, yet she hated the life it forced upon her. She longed for freedom, yet she was bound tighter than ever. And as her pregnancy progressed, one haunting question echoed in her mind. What kind of mother could she possibly be? Emily's pregnancy was a long and difficult journey. Though she was young, her body bore the weight of it with exhaustion and strain. Each passing month made the truth more visible, and with it came the whispers, the stares, and the judgment of the community around her. At school, the change was undeniable. The girl who once turned heads for her beauty and energy now attracted attention for a very different reason. Whispers followed her in the hallways. Some classmates mocked her, others pitied her, and a few avoided her altogether. Teachers who had once encouraged her now looked at her with thinly veiled disappointment, their expectations for her future quietly dissolving. Emily kept her head down, ashamed but too stubborn to show it. Yet every night when she returned home, the walls seemed to close in on her. Her parents did what they could, but their love was colored by the shadow of disappointment. David's silence spoke volumes. His daughter had ignored every warning, and now she carried the consequence in her womb. Margaret tried to be gentle, to show compassion, but even she struggled. She had raised her daughter with love and discipline, only to watch her fall into the very trap they had warned her about. Emily felt alone. Ryan was gone, a ghost who had vanished the moment responsibility knocked on his door. He didn't call. He didn't write. He didn't check in to see how she was. For all she knew, he had already moved on to another girl, whispering the same empty promises that once captured her heart. The nights were the hardest. She would lie in bed, her body heavy, her thoughts spiraling, the sound of her parents' quiet conversations filtering through the walls. She knew they spoke of her future, of how different her life would be now, of how unprepared she was. And in the silence of those nights, she cried. She cried for the girl she used to be, for the freedom she had thrown away, for the dreams that now seemed out of reach. And then the day came. Emily went into labor in the early hours of the morning. The pain was unbearable, waves of agony that made her question if she had the strength to survive it. She screamed, cried, clutched her mother's hand until her knuckles turned white. Hours passed like an eternity, each contraction a reminder that she was no longer in control of her life. When it was over, she lay in the hospital bed, drenched in sweat, her body trembling with exhaustion. And in her arms lay a tiny baby boy. He was small, fragile, his skin pale and soft, his eyes blinking at the new world he had entered. Emily stared at him, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. Love, fierce and undeniable, surged through her veins. But so did fear. So did despair. So did the crushing weight of responsibility. She was a mother now. At 17. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of her life. The sleepless nights tested her sanity. The constant crying left her raw with frustration. She struggled to breastfeed, struggled to comfort him, struggled to keep herself together. Her body, still healing from childbirth, ached with every movement. Her parents tried to help. Margaret often took the baby so Emily could rest. David provided what financial support he could, buying formula, diapers, and baby clothes. But the unspoken tension never left the air. Emily felt like a burden in her own home, a reminder of a mistake no one could forget. The isolation cut deep. Her friends had vanished. The same girls who once cheered her on at parties now avoided her calls, too busy living the carefree life she once shared with them. She scrolled through their pictures online. Smiles, laughter, nights out, and her heart ached with longing. She had traded that world for sleepless nights and spit-up-stained shirts. The resentment grew quietly, lurking in the corners of her heart. She loved her son, there was no denying that, but she couldn't ignore the truth. She resented what his existence had cost her. She resented Ryan for abandoning her, resented her parents for being right, resented herself for ignoring their warnings. One evening, as she rocked her baby to sleep, the weight of it all crashed down on her. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to the sleeping child, "I love you, but I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough." The months crawled by. The baby grew, but so did Emily's exhaustion. She lost weight, her cheeks hollowing, her eyes sunken with fatigue. She barely recognized the girl in the mirror. The vibrant teenager had been replaced by a weary young mother, her youth stolen by responsibility. Financial struggles added another layer of stress. Though her parents provided, it was never enough. Diapers, formula, doctor visits, everything was expensive. Emily wanted to work, to contribute, but the demands of caring for her child left her with little opportunity. Each day felt like a cycle she couldn't escape: feed, change, soothe, repeat. And then came the nights when the baby cried endlessly, his wails piercing the silence of the house. Emily would pace the floor, bouncing him in her arms, whispering pleas for him to stop. Sometimes she broke down, collapsing on the couch, sobbing as the baby screamed in her arms. She felt like a failure, convinced she wasn't cut out for motherhood. Her parents watched with concern, but even their presence couldn't ease the heaviness pressing down on her. Margaret offered comfort, but Emily often pushed her away, ashamed of her weakness. David, though quieter now, couldn't hide the sadness in his eyes every time he looked at his daughter. By the time her baby reached 5 months, Emily was unraveling. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the unfulfilled dreams, it was all too much. She longed for escape, for just one night of freedom, for the chance to breathe without the weight of responsibility crushing her chest. And in her darkest moments, the thought returned. The thought she had once buried but could no longer silence. The thought of leaving her baby behind. Not forever, she told herself. Just for a while. Just long enough to catch her breath, to feel like herself again. But as the idea took root, it grew stronger, whispering that maybe, just maybe, he would be better off without her. She pushed the thought away, horrified at herself. But it kept coming back, louder, more persuasive. Each sleepless night, each moment of frustration, each reminder of what she had lost, it all fed the temptation. Until, one day, she made the decision that would change everything. Before we continue this story, please take a moment to support us by taking a moment to subscribe, like, comment and share this video. In order to help us bring more amazing stories to you, click the notification bell. By the time Emily's baby reached 5 months, the weight of motherhood pressed down on her like an anchor she could no longer carry. Each day bled into the next, a blur of crying, feeding, changing, and exhaustion. There was no rest, no freedom, no chance to reclaim even a fragment of the life she once knew. Her parents, though supportive in their own way, were still wrapped in quiet disappointment. Their love was there, but it was restrained, layered beneath sighs and looks that reminded Emily of everything she had lost. She often caught her father's eyes on her, sad, tired, filled with the heaviness of a man watching his daughter's youth vanish. Her mother's care was softer, but even that felt smothering, as though every gesture was a reminder that Emily had failed to stand on her own. And so Emily felt alone. Utterly, desperately alone. Her baby was innocent, pure, his blue eyes gazing at her with unspoken trust. But each time he cried, each time he demanded more of her than she felt capable of giving, the resentment flared inside her. She hated herself for it, hated that she could look at her child and feel both overwhelming love and unbearable frustration. She whispered apologies into the night as he slept, promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The breaking point came on a cold evening in late autumn. The wind rattled the windows, carrying with it the chill of approaching winter. Emily had spent the entire day trying to calm her son, who seemed determined to cry without end. She was exhausted, her body aching, her mind frayed to the point of collapse. Hours passed, the baby's cries echoing through the small house. Emily paced the floor, rocking him in her arms, whispering desperate pleas for silence. Her tears mingled with his, her voice breaking as she said over and over, "Please, please stop." But the cries didn't stop. At some point, something inside her broke. She placed her baby gently in his crib, collapsed onto the floor beside it, and buried her face in her hands. Sobs shook her body, deep and raw, as the weight of her reality crashed down. She was 17 years old, trapped in a life she didn't want, bound to a responsibility she couldn't escape. She had no friends, no partner, no future. Just a baby who depended on her for everything she didn't know how to give. And in that moment of despair, the thought returned. Stronger this time. Louder. More convincing. Leave him. The words echoed in her mind, relentless. Leave him. Just for a little while. Someone else will take care of him. Someone better. Someone stronger. She shook her head, horrified. How could she think such a thing? How could a mother abandon her child? But the thought refused to leave. It clung to her, whispering promises of relief, of freedom, of escape. It told her she wasn't capable, that her baby deserved better, that she was only hurting him by staying. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her son's breathing. She imagined a life without the burden she carried, a life where she could be young again, where she could dance under the stars without guilt, where she could smile without the shadow of regret. By morning, the decision had been made. Emily dressed quietly, her movements slow and deliberate. She bundled her baby in warm clothes, wrapped him in a soft blanket, and held him close as she walked out of the house. Her parents were still asleep, unaware of the storm raging inside their daughter's heart. The streets were quiet, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Emily walked aimlessly at first, her arms heavy with the weight of the child she loved and yet could not keep. She wandered through familiar roads, her mind racing, her heart pounding. And then she saw it. The canteen. It was a small place, nestled on the corner of the street, its windows glowing with the soft light of early morning preparations. The smell of fresh bread and coffee drifted through the air, a reminder of warmth and comfort. People often gathered there, workers grabbing breakfast, children stopping in before school, neighbors sharing conversation over steaming cups of tea. Emily stopped in front of the door, her breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was where her baby would be safe. Someone would find him here. Someone would care for him. Someone better than her. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket around him. He stirred, his tiny face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the decision being made. Emily's tears fell freely, dripping onto his soft skin. She kissed his forehead, breathing in the scent of him one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I love you more than anything, but I can't do this. You deserve more than me." With shaking hands, she placed him gently in front of the canteen door. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her heart screamed at her to pick him back up, to run, to hold on to him and never let go. But her mind, consumed by exhaustion and despair, urged her forward. She stepped back, her vision blurred by tears. The door creaked open, the morning rush beginning. Voices drifted out, unaware of the tiny life left on their doorstep. Emily turned quickly, her legs carrying her away before anyone could see her. Her heart pounded, her chest ached, every step tearing her apart. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Behind her, the cries began. Her baby, now awake, wailed into the morning air, his tiny voice piercing the silence. The sound cut through Emily like a knife, but she forced herself to keep walking. Her body trembled, her hands clenched, her face soaked with tears. Each cry grew fainter as the distance widened, until finally, she could no longer hear him. Emily stumbled into an alley, collapsed against the cold brick wall, and sobbed until her body shook with the force of it. She had done it. She had left him. And in that moment, her life splintered into two halves, before and after. Back at the canteen, a worker stepped outside to sweep the front steps. Her eyes widened as she saw the bundle on the ground. She bent down, gasping when she realized what it was. A baby, crying softly, wrapped in a blanket. She called out, and soon others gathered, their voices filled with shock and concern. Someone ran inside to call the authorities. Another knelt down, gently lifting the baby into her arms, rocking him in an attempt to soothe his cries. The canteen, once a place of warmth and laughter, was now the scene of heartbreak and questions. Who had left this child? And what would become of him now? And Emily, hidden in the shadows of her choices, watched from a distance. She saw the worker cradle her son, saw the small crowd gather, heard the buzz of voices as her secret was discovered. Her heart shattered all over again. But she didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the maze of streets, leaving behind the child she had loved yet could not keep. Her story was far from over. But from that day forward, nothing would ever be the same. The sound of the baby's cries outside the canteen drew immediate attention. The worker who had stepped outside to sweep the front steps froze in disbelief at the small bundle lying near the doorway. For a moment, she thought her eyes deceived her, but the faint whimper rising from within the blanket shattered any doubt. With trembling hands, she bent down, her heart racing as she gently pulled back the folds. A tiny face, flushed with tears, blinked up at her. The baby's cries grew louder as the sudden chill of the morning air touched his skin. "Oh my God!" she gasped, her voice cracking. "It's a baby! Someone's left a baby here!" Her shout carried into the canteen, pulling heads up from breakfast plates and halting conversations mid-sentence. Chairs scraped against the floor as people rushed toward the doorway. In seconds, a small crowd gathered, voices overlapping in shock, disbelief, and confusion. "Whose baby is that?" someone cried. "Was he just abandoned?" another whispered. "Who could do such a thing?" The worker cradled the child in her arms, rocking him instinctively, though her hands shook with nerves. She glanced around wildly, searching the street for any sign of who had left him. But the road was quiet. Only a few early risers passed by, their faces mirroring the same stunned confusion. "Call the police," a man barked, pulling his phone from his pocket. "This baby's been abandoned, we need to call someone now." Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder until a police car pulled up to the curb. Two officers stepped out, their expressions hardening as they spotted the crowd and the child at its center. The older of the two approached first, his eyes softening as he looked at the baby. "Everyone step back please," he said firmly. "We need space." The worker reluctantly handed the baby to the officer, who held him carefully, his large hands surprisingly gentle. The child quieted slightly, soothed by the warmth of new arms. The second officer began asking questions. "Did anyone see who left the baby here? Did anyone notice a young woman, maybe in a hurry, carrying something?" The crowd murmured, heads shaking. No one had seen anything. Emily had slipped away like a shadow, her disappearance as silent as her despair had been loud within her heart. As the officers worked, another call was made, to social services. Within half an hour, a woman from the department arrived, her face kind but lined with the weariness of someone who had seen too many tragedies. She took the baby into her arms, checking his condition with practiced eyes. "He looks healthy," she murmured, her voice soft. "Hungry, maybe cold, but otherwise fine. He's strong." Her words eased the tension in the crowd, though sorrow lingered in every face. The idea that a mother could leave her child, here, of all places, gnawed at the hearts of those who watched. Meanwhile, Emily sat only a few streets away, hidden in the shadow of a narrow alley. Her body shook with silent sobs, her head buried in her hands. Through the muffled distance, she could still faintly hear the sirens, still imagine the cries of her baby as he was discovered. She wanted to run back, to scream that she was his mother, to fall on her knees and beg for forgiveness. But fear rooted her to the spot. Fear of judgment, of shame, of the law. Fear of her parents' faces if they ever found out. And so she remained in hiding, watching from afar as her child was carried away by strangers. Her heart shattered with every step that took him further from her, yet she did not move. She could not. Word of the discovery spread quickly. By midday, whispers had traveled through the town, about the baby left outside the canteen, about the police searching for the mother, about the tragedy no one could understand. Emily's parents heard the news while sitting at their kitchen table. Her mother, busy preparing lunch, nearly dropped a plate when a neighbor rushed in, breathless with the story. "A baby," the neighbor said, her voice urgent. "They found a baby this morning, left outside the canteen. Police are everywhere, trying to find the mother. Can you imagine?" Emily's father froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Her mother paled, her hand pressing against her chest. In an instant, their minds went to Emily. Their daughter. 17, fragile, exhausted. The thought struck like lightning, too terrible to believe but impossible to ignore. "No," her mother whispered, shaking her head. "No, she wouldn't, she couldn't." But doubt crept in, heavy and unrelenting. When Emily returned home hours later, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying, her parents were waiting. Their expressions were a storm, fear, anger, heartbreak all tangled together. "Emily," her father said, his voice trembling. "Where have you been?" She froze in the doorway, her body rigid, her breath caught in her throat. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then her mother stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emily," she whispered, almost pleading, "please tell me, that baby they found this morning, it wasn't." Emily broke. Her knees gave out, her body collapsing to the floor as sobs tore from her throat. She covered her face with her hands, unable to look at them, unable to deny what her silence already confirmed. Her mother gasped, a sound of pure devastation, as her father's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "My God," he whispered, his voice raw. "Emily, what have you done?" The room spun with grief. Her mother dropped to her knees beside her, pulling Emily into her arms despite the weight of betrayal. Her tears soaked her daughter's hair as she rocked her like a child, murmuring broken words of comfort that could not undo what had been done. Her father turned away, his shoulders shaking as he fought against his own storm of emotions, anger, disappointment, sorrow too deep for words. The house that had once been filled with warmth now carried only silence and despair. Outside, the town continued to buzz with speculation. The police worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, reviewing cameras near the canteen, questioning witnesses. Slowly, a picture began to form. A young woman, seen walking nearby that morning, her arms full, her pace hurried. Grainy footage, a fleeting glimpse, but enough to raise suspicions. The walls around Emily's secret began to close in. The hours that followed were the longest Emily had ever lived through. She lay curled on her bed, her body trembling, her mind replaying every sound, every image of that morning. Her baby's cry still echoed in her ears, sharp and piercing as though lodged in her very soul. Her mother sat beside her, refusing to leave, whispering fragments of comfort through her own tears. "We'll figure this out, Emily. We'll fix this somehow. You're not alone." But Emily felt alone. More alone than ever before. Downstairs, her father paced restlessly, his hands pressed to his temples. He had spoken little since Emily's breakdown. The weight of betrayal sat heavy in his chest, colliding with the heartbreak of seeing his daughter so broken. His anger had no place to go, directed both at Emily and at himself for failing to protect her from herself. By evening, the knock came. From unavoidable. Emily froze at the sound, her body stiffening. Her mother's hand tightened on hers, as though trying to shield her from what they both knew was inevitable. Her father opened the door. Two officers stood on the porch, their faces grim but professional. Behind them, the flashing lights of a police car cast red and blue shadows across the lawn. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter?" the older officer asked. "We need to speak with your daughter, Emily." Her mother's breath caught. Her father's jaw tightened, his eyes closing for a brief moment before he stepped aside. The officers entered, their presence filling the small house with tension. Emily's mother guided them upstairs, where Emily sat on the edge of her bed, pale and trembling. Her eyes flicked up at the sight of the uniforms, then fell again to her hands. The officer crouched slightly, softening his tone. "Emily, we're not here to hurt you. But we need to talk about what happened this morning." Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head, her lips parting as though to speak, but no sound came. "We know it was you," the officer continued gently. "We have footage, witnesses. And your parents, they deserve the truth. But more importantly, your baby deserves it." The word, baby, struck like a knife. Emily's sobs broke free, her hands flying to cover her face. "I couldn't do it," she cried, her voice raw. "I couldn't be a mother anymore. I'm so tired, I'm so scared. I love him, I do, but I couldn't give him what he needs." Her mother wept silently beside her, while her father stood rigid by the wall, his face a mask of contained anguish. The officer waited, giving her space, before speaking again. "Emily, what you did was serious. But right now, what matters most is making sure your baby is safe. He's in good hands with social services. He's healthy. He's being cared for." Emily's chest rose and fell with heavy sobs. A sliver of relief touched her, fragile and fleeting. Her baby was safe. But it did little to silence the crushing guilt. The officers didn't place her in handcuffs. Not yet. Instead, they asked her to come with them to the station, to give a statement. Her parents insisted on going too. The ride to the station was silent. Emily sat between them, staring out the window at the blur of passing lights. She wondered if people in those houses, warm, safe, together, knew how lucky they were. At the station, she was led into a small room with plain walls and a table in the center. A single camera recorded from the corner. Her parents sat behind her, silent witnesses to the unraveling of their daughter's choices. "Emily," the officer began, "we need you to tell us, in your own words, what happened." Her voice trembled as she recounted everything. The sleepless nights, the overwhelming pressure, the loneliness that clawed at her, the moment of breaking when she placed her baby outside the canteen. She spoke through tears, her words spilling out in a torrent of guilt and despair. When she finished, silence hung heavy in the room. The officer leaned forward. "Emily, do you understand the seriousness of what you've done? Abandonment is a crime. But more than that, it put your child at risk. Anything could have happened to him out there." "I know," she whispered, her voice broken. "I know. And I hate myself for it." Her mother sobbed quietly, her father's fists clenched on the table. The officers exchanged a glance, then stood. "We'll be in touch. Social services will be evaluating the situation. For now, Emily, you'll go home with your parents. But this isn't over." Back at the house, the silence was unbearable. Emily retreated to her room, curling under the blankets like a child, while her parents sat downstairs, whispering in hushed tones about what would come next. The town buzzed with speculation. Everyone knew about the baby at the canteen. Whispers followed Emily's family, though no one confronted them directly. Judgment weighed heavy, invisible yet suffocating. Days passed in a blur. Emily ate little, slept less. She stared at the ceiling for hours, hearing her baby's cries in her mind. Each sound tore at her, a reminder of the choice she could never undo. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the doorbell rang again. Emily's father answered. This time, it was the woman from social services. She carried a folder in her hands, her face calm but serious. "We've made arrangements," she explained gently once inside. "The baby is in temporary foster care. He's doing well. But Emily, decisions will need to be made about custody. Whether he can come back into this home, or whether another family will raise him." The words dropped like stones into the room. Emily felt the air leave her lungs, her vision spinning. The idea of her son being raised by strangers, of her never holding him again, was unbearable. Yet she said nothing, because deep down, a voice whispered the cruel truth: maybe he would be better off without her. Her mother wept openly, her father's face hardened with grief. The social worker left after explaining the next steps: meetings, evaluations, hearings. And so, the Carter family sat together in silence, each of them drowning in their own storm of emotions. Emily crept upstairs later that night, staring out her window at the darkened streets. Somewhere out there, her son lay in a crib that wasn't his own, cared for by strangers who would never know the depth of her love or the depth of her failure. Her tears blurred the stars, her chest aching with a pain no words could capture. And as she pressed her forehead to the glass, she whispered into the night, "I'm sorry. I'll never stop being sorry." The house was quiet, the future uncertain. But one thing was clear: the consequences of her choice had only just begun. And this was only the beginning of her story. The days after the social worker's visit blurred together in a haze of silence and sorrow. Emily remained locked in her room most of the time, curtains drawn, blankets pulled around her like armor against a world that seemed determined to judge her. But no matter how tightly she wrapped herself in the darkness, she could not escape the sound in her mind, the faint echo of her baby's cries outside the canteen, the moment his tiny body left her arms forever. Her parents tried in their own ways to cope. Her mother hovered close, knocking softly at the door with meals Emily barely touched, whispering through the wood that she loved her, that they would get through this somehow. Her father stayed distant, his grief sharp-edged, his disappointment heavy in the air. He spent long hours outside, repairing things that did not need fixing, avoiding the storm that raged inside the house. The town, however, did not avoid it. Whispers spread like wildfire. People talked in hushed voices at the grocery store, at the church, at the canteen where it had all begun. Strangers who had once smiled at Emily's mother now turned their eyes away. Friends who used to laugh with Emily in the school hallways crossed to the other side, their faces filled with quiet judgment. "She's the one," some whispered. "The girl who left her baby," others said. What kind of mother could do that? Though no one spoke to Emily directly, she felt their eyes whenever she ventured out. She tried once, a week later, to walk to the corner store with her mother. But the stairs were too much. She hurried back home, tears streaming down her face, vowing never to leave again. Nights were the worst. Sleep offered no escape, only cruel visions that woke her with her own cries. In her dreams, she stood once again outside the canteen, her baby's cries louder, more desperate. But this time, when she turned to walk away, she found herself frozen. She couldn't move. She was forced to watch as shadows crept closer, as danger surrounded him, as his cries turned to silence. She always woke before she could reach him. More than once, she thought of running. Packing a bag, slipping out into the night, leaving the house, the whispers, the shame behind. But every time, something pulled her back. A memory of her mother's arms holding her tight. A glimpse of her father's tired eyes. Or the simple truth that no matter where she went, her guilt would follow. Social services returned the following week. The same woman sat at the kitchen table, her folder open, her tone gentle but firm. "Emily," she said softly, "we've placed your son with a temporary foster family. They're kind, experienced, and willing to care for him as long as needed. He's safe, healthy and well." Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to ask questions: what color his blanket was, whether he smiled in his sleep, if he reached for anyone the way he once reached for her. But her voice refused to rise. She sat silent, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, tears burning behind her eyes. Her mother spoke instead. "What happens now?" "There will be a review," the woman explained. "Custody, care, and whether Emily is capable of providing a stable environment for her child. It won't be decided quickly. For now, our priority is the baby's safety. Her father's jaw clenched. And what about Emily? She's still a child herself. The woman's eyes softened, but her answer was steady. She'll receive counseling. Support will be offered. But the decision will ultimately rest on what's best for the child. The words sank like stones. What's best for the child? Emily knew what that meant. They were already deciding she wasn't fit, that she wasn't enough, that her mistake had defined her forever. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time since that morning, a thought pressed against her chest so hard it stole her breath. I want to see him. The urge grew stronger each day. She imagined his tiny hands, his soft hair, the way he would nuzzle against her chest when he was hungry. The ache in her arms became unbearable. She thought of the foster family, strangers holding him, feeding him, rocking him to sleep, and jealousy stabbed through her heart. That was her baby. Hers. And yet he was gone. 2 weeks after the abandonment, Emily reached her breaking point. It was a quiet afternoon when she slipped out of the house. Her parents were busy, her father in the yard, her mother cleaning the kitchen. Emily pulled on her coat, tucked her hair into a hood, and walked quickly down the street. She didn't know exactly where she was going, only that she had to move. Her feet carried her toward the social services building. She lingered across the street, staring at the brick walls, the doors that separated her from her son. For nearly an hour, she stood there, heart pounding, watching as people came and went. She imagined walking in, demanding to see him, begging them to give her another chance. But fear kept her frozen. Fear of rejection. Fear of being told she had lost him forever. So instead she turned away, tears blurring her vision as she stumbled home. The next day, the urge returned stronger. This time, it pulled her further, toward the edge of town, where the foster family lived. She had overheard her parents whispering their name, a small detail that had rooted itself in her mind. The house was modest, with a white picket fence and a small garden out front. Emily stood across the street, her breath caught in her throat, her eyes locked on the windows. And then she saw him. Her baby. A woman stood at the window, cradling him in her arms. His little face peeked over the blanket, his tiny mouth open in a smile that pierced Emily's soul. The woman laughed softly, bouncing him gently, her affection undeniable. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, her body trembling with the force of her emotions. Relief, joy, sorrow, jealousy, all tangled together in a storm she could barely contain. She wanted to run across the street, pound on the door, scream that he was hers. But her legs refused to move. Instead, she sank to the curb, burying her face in her hands as sobs tore through her. She stayed there for what felt like hours, until the sun dipped low and the cold bit into her skin. Only then did she drag herself home, her body heavy, her heart shattered all over again. Her secret visits became a pattern. Every few days she would slip away, walking to that house, standing across the street just to catch a glimpse. Sometimes she saw him in the arms of the foster mother, other times in a stroller, or lying on a blanket in the yard. Each time, her heart both soared and broke. But secrets never stay hidden for long. One evening, as she crept back through the front door, her father was waiting in the living room. His face was hard, his eyes sharp. "Where have you been, Emily?" he asked, his voice low. Her heart stuttered. She swallowed hard, words failing her. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "I followed you today. I saw where you went." Her breath caught. Shame flooded her cheeks. "Emily," he continued, his voice trembling now, "do you understand what you're doing? You can't keep showing up there. It's not fair to you, it's not fair to them, and it's not fair to him." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But he's mine," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's my baby." Her father's face softened, pain flickering in his eyes. He sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. "I know, Emily. I know. But the choices we make, they have consequences. And you can't undo this one by standing on the sidewalk." His words cut deep, leaving her trembling. That night, Emily lay awake, the urge to see her son warring with the reality her father had spoken. She was trapped in a cycle of longing and regret, of love and despair, with no end in sight. And as the moonlight filtered through her window, she realized the truth. She could not go on like this. Something had to give. The question was, what? Would she fight for him, risking everything to prove she could be a mother? Or would she surrender completely, letting him go forever, even if it broke her? The choice loomed before her, heavy and unrelenting. And in the quiet of that night, as the world slept around her, Emily whispered a promise to herself, a vow that would shape everything yet to come. This isn't the end. I'll find a way back to him. No matter what it takes. The room was still, her words lingering in the darkness like a fragile spark of hope. But outside, in the world beyond her window, the shadows of consequence grew deeper, waiting for the moment to strike. Episode 1 had ended. But Emily's story was only just beginning. Behind every thrill there is a shadow. And Emily's shadow came in the form of a child. A child conceived not out of preparation or commitment, but out of moments where recklessness outweighed reason. And yet, though the world might see her pregnancy as punishment, that child was still a life, innocent, fragile, dependent. A baby who needed love, care, and stability in a world that Emily was not ready to provide. Episode 1 has carried us through the whirlwind of her decisions. We've watched her ignore the warnings of her parents, distance herself from the values she was raised with, and walk into the arms of fleeting pleasure. We've seen the early months of her pregnancy shrouded in confusion and fear. And finally, we've stood with her at the canteen door, watching as desperation stripped her of reason and led her to lay her baby down and walk away. That moment, the abandonment, was more than just a physical act. It was the manifestation of all the choices that came before. And though she walked away, she could never escape what she had done. Because guilt has a way of following us, of whispering when the room is quiet, of pressing against the heart when we try to pretend we are free. And for Emily, guilt has already become her closest companion. We've watched her parents struggle too. Her mother, torn between love and disappointment, between nurturing her daughter and holding her accountable. Her father, hardened by grief and frustration, unable to reconcile the image of the little girl he raised with the reality of the young mother who abandoned her child. Their home is no longer a refuge. It is a place weighed down by silence, tension, and unspoken pain. And beyond the walls of their house lies the wider community, a world that does not forget, that does not forgive easily. In the eyes of the town, Emily has become a symbol, her name tied forever to the story of a baby left behind. The whispers trail her, the stares cut into her, and the sense of isolation grows with every step she takes. But the heart of this story, the part that grips us and refuses to let go, lies in Emily's longing. Because despite her actions, despite the mistake, despite the judgment that rains down upon her, she cannot sever the bond between mother and child. She has tried to bury it beneath shame. She has tried to silence it beneath fear. But still, her heart aches, her arms long, and her soul whispers the truth she cannot deny: he is mine. We've seen her venture out, driven by that ache, standing across the street from the foster home, catching fleeting glimpses of her baby in the arms of another. And in those moments, we are forced to confront a question that has no easy answer. Is love enough? Because love is not the same as readiness. Love is not the same as stability. Love is not the same as responsibility. Emily's love for her son is undeniable, but love alone does not feed a child, clothe a child, or shield a child from harm. And so, as this episode closes, we are left with the tension of opposites. On one side, the purity of a mother's love, flawed though it may be. On the other, the harsh reality of consequences, of systems put in place to protect those too vulnerable to protect themselves. What will become of Emily? Will she find a way to fight for her son, to prove that her mistakes do not define her future, that growth is possible, that redemption is within reach? Or will the weight of her past drag her down, pulling her further into despair, further from the baby she cannot stop loving? And what of the baby himself? He cannot choose where he belongs, cannot speak for what he needs. His future is being written not by his own hands, but by the decisions of those around him, his young mother, his weary grandparents, the strangers who now cradle him, and the authorities who weigh his fate in their balance. This is the heartache of stories like Emily's. They remind us that life is not clean, not simple, not easy. They remind us that choices matter, not just in the moment we make them, but in the ripples that stretch out far beyond what we can see. Emily's story is far from over. In fact, what we've witnessed so far is only the beginning. Because within her still burns a vow. A fragile, flickering vow that, despite everything, she will not give up. That somehow, some way, she will find her way back to her son. That the story will not end with abandonment but with redemption, or at least with the chance to fight for it. But redemption is never free. It demands sacrifice. It demands endurance. It demands a willingness to face the past without flinching and to embrace the pain of change. Will Emily be strong enough? Or will the weight of shame, the judgment of the world, and the barriers placed before her prove too much to overcome? These are the questions we carry with us as episode 1 comes to a close. Questions that tug at the heart, that make us look at our own lives, our own choices, our own moments of weakness and wonder, what would I have done? What would I do now? And perhaps that is the true power of Emily's story. Not that it is hers alone, but that in some way, it belongs to all of us. Because we have all, in one way or another, walked down paths we should not have taken. We have all made choices that left scars. We have all known regret. The difference is in what comes next. Do we let those choices define us? Or do we rise, broken but not defeated, to write a new chapter? Emily stands at that very threshold. And in the episodes to come, we will walk with her as she confronts that choice, as she stumbles, as she fights, as she dreams of a life where she is not remembered only for the mistake, but for the strength to overcome it. So, as you take a deep breath and step away from this first episode, carry with you the weight of Emily's tears, the sound of her whispered vow in the dark. This isn't the end. I'll find a way back to him. No matter what it takes. That vow will be tested. That vow will be stretched. That vow will be shaken to its very core. But it will not be forgotten. Because this is only the beginning. If Emily's story has touched you, if it has made you think, made you feel, made you wonder about the fragile line between mistakes and second chances, then you will not want to miss what comes next. Here, on Timeless Stories, we bring you not just entertainment, but journeys that remind us of the resilience of the human heart, of the cost of choices, and of the hope that lingers even in the darkest nights. Subscribe now, join this community, and continue walking with us as Emily's path unfolds. Her story is not finished. And neither is yours. Because in the end, every story is timeless.